Now that the full template is almost there, there are two parts that we need to do before we can start building a questionnaire, which is one, discuss how to insert definitions and how to deal with definitions and defined terms in your agreement. That's first of all. You want to prevent, of course, that if a definition is not used, that it's appearing in the list of the defined terms or in the list of definitions. Of course, it's at the heart of how it works that we do prevent that. And of course, also you want to make sure that if you use the defined term, that it is actually listed also in the article on definitions. But first, I'm going to explain how it works with annexes, how to insert an annex and how to make sure that that works. We do have an annex reference, you might have noticed, in the whereas clause. It's actually over here. So how does that work? The principle is not that difficult. First of all, what you need to understand is that the schedules and annexes are collected in a separate library, which means that you can call upon schedules and annexes from any template. If you have procurement templates and you work with general terms and conditions of purchase, you will typically have that attached as a schedule to your agreement, and you can call upon that schedule from any template in any procurement template. And the other way around, if you work with products and you have your specifications, you would likely have those in a schedule. And if you want to refer to the specifications of a product in a sales schedule, in a manufacturing agreement, or in any other agreement for procurement, for example, then you could call upon the library of annexes. So we have that as a library, and as all the know-how components are collected in a separate library, it's in the upper left bottom bar. If you click on it, it gives you the list with all the schedules and annexes that you might have collected in your system. And here you see that, for example, ELA licensed software is the one listed over here. It's actually the one, if you look into the Word document, what we would, of course, need to include in this evaluation license agreement. Then, how does it work? There's a separate library. If you want to create a new schedule for the library, you could add it over here, and basically it starts building the element. We already have one for evaluation license agreement license software over here. You might modify it, and if you want to modify it, you click over here, and what you then see is basically the same structure for building schedules in annexes, where on the right-hand side, you see that it is automatically called annex heading and then followed by a placeholder. Now, this is not a very attractive one, but you want to insert some sort of instruction to the end user. Insert a description of the licensed software here. And you may as well want to print that in italics. And this should not be a level 2 numbering clause, although that's automatically inserted and done as such, but you probably want to have this as non-numbering plain text. Now, the schedule likewise is ready to go. We go back to the template. We would go to the places where the references are made to the schedules. Of course, you want to prevent that a schedule attaches to a contract while there is no reference in the agreement. Well, essentially Weagree prevents you from doing so. There are some workarounds to attach a document as a schedule without giving it a legal status in your contract. So have a non-status attachment. That's not the way I think it should work. Of course, you should give your schedule a status by referring to it in the agreement, identifying the schedule as such. There are some workarounds for that. I refer to the tutorials on our website, how to deal with that. For us, it's important to understand, first of all, that you need to, on every page in the template where a reference is made to this schedule, and in our case it's only one place, but if there are more clauses referring to Annex 1 or referring to the annex or schedule on licensed software, you would need to make a reference on each of those places. Now, being on the right hand side, we have to create a reference to the clause library, which is on the left hand side, but it being content, we have a separate button for it that links up to the clause library. And if I then go to the list, you will see here that there's an evaluation license agreement, license software 1, and I can insert it over here. And what it does is here it inserts a tag. The tag starts with a square bracket, annex.ela license software, which is the unique reference to the schedule. What I would want to do is underline it, and then it is important to note that you, after inserting the tag, and you want to make an underlined or a bold print or italic or other formatting to it, you must apply the formatting and do include the square brackets of your selected text. So underlinement should include the square brackets, and if you take a look at the HTML code, where you would otherwise rarely arrive, you will see that the underline starts before the square bracket. I'm not going to dig any further into this because it's very odd to use this button, very infrequent. And if you save it, you will see that underneath your template outline there is this annex recognized. So it's also now part of the template, and once this clause comes into the agreement, then also the tag in that clause comes in the agreement, which means that then also the annex is attached to the agreement, and vice versa. So if this clause eventually doesn't arrive into the agreement, then also the annex, if it's not also tagged in other clauses, will not appear as an annex to or an exhibit or an attachment to the agreement. There are a few things that you need to be aware of. You cannot trigger an annex from within an annex. So if you do have to refer to another annex which is not already connected, then you need to make some workarounds. If you would refer from an annex to an annex, you would create a loop which brings the database into inserting the one into the other, into the one, into the other, into the one, into the other. And that is creating an endless loop, and computers don't like that. So don't insert a reference to itself in an annex. So in the annex licensed software, you should not tag a reference to that same annex, and you should also not tag an annex outside the annex. So that is one thing that I wanted to remark. A similar thing can occur with definitions. If you look at the definitions, you might have noticed that there is already this block on the left-hand side referring to definitions. And if you unfold it, you will see that there is a reference to affiliates, but also to relating to confidential information, disclosing party and receiving party. Not surprisingly, because of course clauses that are coming from the clause library, they may drag along definitions as well. So those definitions also need to appear in the agreement in the list of definitions. Let's take a little bit a closer look into where these definitions come from. They are used, as I said, in the confidentiality clause. So if we focus on it, we get a warning, of course. And I'm going to look only and not doing anything else. Then I think it's in limited use. Yeah, I'm correct. Halfway the clause, what you can see is there's a tag basically triggering the definition of affiliates. So the receiving party shall disclose confidential information to its tag affiliates. Now what you want to happen, of course, the tag triggers the definition to come into the agreement. That's one thing. We're going to deal with that later. Plus the tag triggers the defined term of that definition to be inserted here on this place. So the tag definition affiliates will eventually be replaced by the defined term, which is in this case affiliates. And it's going to be a little bit confusing if I click on confidential information. So mind you, don't get shocked. Here is the same principle. We have the tag definition, which has a unique name structure, xref, because it contains a cross-reference, and it will insert on this place likely the defined term confidential information, and here it will insert the defined term disclosing party. And the tag does two things, inserting here the defined term that merely refers to it, and it will be in bold print, of course, because it has been selected all and printed in bold. Plus, it will list the definition of disclosing party, receiving party, and confidential party, confidential information in the list of definitions. Now let's go back. It has a tag, therefore, and secondly, the definitions need to appear on one place. How does that work? We already inserted a global building block. That is because for the global building block, for the agreement, it doesn't really matter which definitions are being used. This is not something that you type in hard type and you make each definition optional. No, these definitions come in if they are tagged in a clause that comes into the agreement, and if they are tagged over there, the definition itself will be listed over here. And the starting phrase in this agreement would everywhere be the same, as well as the header of the agreement definitions. And it should of course be definitions and not definitions only, but that's the name of the global building block, of course. So let's also dig into this global building block and see how that works on the background. What you see is an article level 1. Here it is called interpretation. You may as well, because there are no interpretation elements over here, you may as well give it the title level 1 definitions. There's the lead in to the clause, and it should probably not have a caption because there's no second one, and the header is basically the header of the article. And B, level 2, no numbering in this agreement, and then followed by a clause with a tag. And the tag that you insert is interpretation, and there where you have this tag inserted in a clause, all your defined definitions will be listed in alphabetical order. It allows you to not have the definitions listed in this definitions article, but for example to list them all in a separate schedule. That's also possible. A schedule for definitions only dedicated for definitions and interpretation. Or if you don't like to start reading an agreement with Article 1, the list of definitions, to put the article of definitions at the end of the agreement, and in that clause put the tag interpretation. And there where you put that tag, the definitions that are tagged will appear eventually. Now let's see if we can insert a licensed software reference definition and how we can deal with that. The licensed software is defined in the recital. That's going to be recital A. So that's going to be over here. Now what we might do is that we create a cross-reference to this clause already. So that's what I'm going to do. Background defined license software. Inserts the paragraph number from the cross as that number appears in the document. I insert it over here and have a clause that apparently has unique number 333,330 as the unique number. I'm going to take it away, Shift Delete, copy it to the clipboard, and then we would start inserting the definition. I go to the library of defined terms. I can search for licensed software, and it's actually not there, so I would need to create a new one myself. If I do that, then I would need to have a unique name, which could be a prefix referring to the name of the agreement, so an abbreviation of Evaluation License Agreement, and then licensed software being the unique name to be used for the tag, and then of course the defined term that is to be inserted on the place where the tag is put is merely licensed software. And then what we have is basically the same. We have a style definition, and we would have licensed software has the meaning ascribed to it in recital. And then we can insert the cross-reference. And of course, this needs to have the formatting that you apply to all of your definitions. In our case, we don't use quotation marks around it, but simple bold print. If you would, it would disturb the alphabetical order, of course, because quotation marks have their own alphabetical ordering, either before or after the alphabet. And so you need to be consistent, and anyhow you need to be consistent, of course. Then we do have the licensed software definition built into the library, and now all that we need to do is replace this tag, probably over here, by the ELA licensed software tag. And here you pick up the same as we've seen before. It is a tag, square bracket opening, definition, indicating that it has to be picked from the definitions library, a unique reference to licensed software. And if you look into the list, you will see that licensed software is now listed in the list of definitions. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is basically what I wanted to tell you about inserting a template. There's a separate session on troubleshooting. So if you have some troubles in dealing with it, the insertion of the cross-reference in the definition may have been a little bit confusing, but I hope that you understand the principle that you have a library of definitions, that every definition has a unique reference name plus a defined term, and that in the text of the agreement where the clause refers or uses the definition, that on that place where the definition is used, you insert a tag from the library. So you use the upper right button bar for inserting the tag, where the tag will be replaced by the defined term, but the tag will still have, when you view it over here, the unique reference name. There are some specialties related to definitions, and there are a few things that I would like to remark. It is possible to to insert tags, tagging other definition in the text of a definition. That doesn't create a loop, so the definition text of Article 2 may contain definition tags triggering other definitions to come in. And I hope you will appreciate by now that if the clause with the tag referring to a definition comes into the agreement, then also the defined term or the definition comes into the list of definitions. So if the clause that contains the tag is made optional in the questionnaire, and the end user strikes essentially through the Q&A answer the insertion of that clause, then also that definition will not appear in the list of definitions. That basically means that you have to think of where to insert the definition tags. Typically what you would do is you would collect them a little bit in the background clauses, so in the very beginning, and as you would basically seek the most prominent or the most obvious place to trigger definition. So in a confidentiality clause, you would typically insert the confidentiality related tags like receiving party and disclosing party and confidential information. If an article 2.1 or the scope of a license will typically also contain a lot of tags because the scope of the agreement is usually defined in article 2.1. But think of where you put the tags. It's helpful to put them on a sort of prominent place. That was what I wanted to tell you about inserting your template. There's a separate course on how to do an automated import. For understanding the automated import, it was very helpful that you trained yourself in the structuring on the left-hand side. So with the indenting of clauses, you will see that in the next, separate tutorial on that. And after that, we will start building in questionnaire, so a Q&A. Thank you.